It's a frigid April morning on Lake Peipus. Alexander Nevsky, the Russian commander, scans the icy expanse, eyes fixed on the approaching crusaders. His diverse forces, tribal aristocrats, peasant militiamen, and horse archers, stand ready along the shore. The archers nock their arrows, ready to unleash a deadly barrage. Nevsky's heart pounds as the Teutonic cavalry forms a wedge, charging forward. The Russian prince raises his sword, signaling the defense. The 22-year-old leader had already proven his mettle, but this battle would define the success or failure of his reign. The moment of reckoning is at hand. As Alexander Nevsky leads his forces into battle, immerse yourself in the epic struggles of medieval warfare with Belright, where you forge your own destiny and lead a rebellion against oppression. Framed for the assassination of the crown prince in your youth, you've spent years in exile, hiding from the wrath of the crown. But now, fate has brought you back to the land you once called home. Belright, a single-player or co-op, open-world, medieval strategy survival sim game, challenges you to uncover the truth and bring justice to a broken nation. From humble beginnings, work your way up from a tiny settlement to the leader of a full-fledged rebellion. Deal with regional threats, gain renown, and gather resources to advance your cause. Recruit companions to aid in your quests and expand your settlement. Lead your army into battle with skill-based directional combat, employing different strategies, formations, and equipment to overthrow the Crown's oppressive rule. Belright is out now in early access on Steam. Check the link in the description for more information. Your rebellion awaits. By the late 12th century, the Eastern Baltic was the last stronghold of European paganism, where a patchwork of tribes lived and fought among each other. The region was characterized by harsh winters and vast forests. Paganism was a source of fear and fascination for medieval Christians, with the loose organization of tribes positioned between the Catholic West and Orthodox East. Livonia, encompassing present-day Latvia and Estonia, became a focal point during this period. The Baltic Crusades, initiated by German and Scandinavian merchants, saw the church and military orders, like the Sword Brethren and Teutonic Knights, try and convert the local population while expanding their territory. Military pressure from northern crusades in the 12th and 13th centuries led to Baltic militarization, with fortified towns emerging from trade hubs. In the subsequent years, Crusaders continued its expansion into Livonia and southern Estonia. The Estonians in the north managed to repel an invading force of sword brothers, augmented with local auxiliaries. But when a Danish crusading force arrived in 1222 and established the fortress of Tallinn, any resistance was futile. The entirety of Estonia was partitioned between the Danish king Valdemar and Bishop Albert of Riga. When, in 1225, a papal legate arrived, he divided Livonia into principalities, directly controlled by the papacy. These crusading campaigns were incredibly violent and bloody, with entire towns often being exterminated in the process. A decade later, Pope Gregorius called for another crusade against the heathen Baltic peoples. In late summer, a crusading party from Holstein arrived and requested the master of the Sword Brethren, Volkwin, to lead them into battle. He set his eyes on the south. Traditionally, you wouldn't want to campaign in autumn and winter. However, the Holstein Knights arrived too late for a summer campaign, and they were persuasive to the degree that Volkwin began organizing an autumn campaign, likely against better judgment. What followed was a devastating ambush by a united pagan army at the Battle of Sol. They defeated the Sword Brethren, killed most of their knights and its master. The defeat forced the Brethren to merge with the Teutonic Knights. From here on out, this branch of the Teutonic Knights became known as the Livonian Order, as the Pope assigned Estonia to the Danes and Latvia to the Livonian Order. the Knights were now overstretched from Poland to Lake Peipus. Their expansion to the east worried the Russian cities to the east, particularly the city of Novgorod. Medieval Novgorod, a powerful northern Russian city, was a key trade hub despite its bleak agricultural prospects. Surrounded by swamps, it thrived on trade routes connecting the Gulf of Finland, Baltic, and Central Asia, trading furs, walrus ivory, and fish. Founded by Slovene tribes and later influenced by Kiev, Novgorod's governance involved an invited knyaz, or prince, and a powerful town council, the vechi. The knyaz generally had a personal army and was tasked with the protection of the city. Its unique character included a large community of foreign merchants and a mix of Slavs, Finns, and Balts. However, it struggled against serious external threats. Relations with Pskov, a subordinate city with fertile lands, were turbulent. The city's relations with other Russian states and the Orthodox Church strengthened its distinct identity from Catholic Europe. Novgorod faced threats from Crusaders and rising Lithuanian power. Internal disputes complicated responses to these threats, with divided opinions on resisting or allying with Crusaders. Meanwhile, there was a scourge from the east. The Mongols, who invaded Russia in 1223, brutally decimated cities, earning the fearful nickname Tatars, roughly translating to the people from hell. With death and destruction around the city, Novgorod adopted a policy of submission to avoid destruction, even before the Mongols reached the city. This approach, combined with a sudden spring thaw hindering the Mongols, allowed Novgorod to survive and maintain its economic and cultural life under Mongol rule, further distancing itself from Catholic Europe. Alexander Nevsky, the young ruler of Novgorod, exemplified this pragmatic approach. Born around 1220, Alexander came from a distinguished and warlike family. Upon his elder brother's death in 1236, Alexander was appointed the sole knyaz of Novgorod. His marriage in 1239 to the daughter of the ruler of Polotsk aimed to strengthen regional alliances. But the young and inexperienced ruler would soon find his reign tested, both in the east and west. In 1240, Pope Gregory incited a crusade against Novgorod, citing their alleged neglect of converting pagans. The Swedes, led by Bishop Thomas of Finland, launched an incursion into Novgorodian territory, but were repelled by Alexander at the Neva River, earning him the moniker Nevsky and public acclaim. Simultaneously, an army consisting of Teutonic, Estonian, Danish, and Sword Brethren knights captured the Russian city of Pskov. However, they left a minimal garrison. They subsequently conquered Izborsk and the stone-built castle Koporia. Danish involvement waned with the death of King Waldemar, but the Livonian Order sought to exploit the situation, aiming to violate treaties and conquer Novgorod and northern Estonia. Pskov, being a subordinate city of Novgorod, asked for help. Learning of Pskov's fall, Alexander was enraged and, unlike his cautious approach with the Mongols, he sought to swiftly retaliate. He collected an army and launched a counterattack against the garrisoned knights. With support from his brother Andrei's troops, he decisively recaptured Koporia in 1241. The fall of Pskov the following year dealt a severe blow to the Crusaders, with Alexander's forces hailed as liberators. In contrast to their promising start, the Livonian Order had been weakened as some of their knights participated at the Battle of Liegnitz the year before. Here, the Mongols decisively defeated a combined Christian army, and now the Order lost all their spoils in the new territories. Alexander didn't stop there. He decided to launch a punitive expedition into the Livonian Order's territory, south of Dorpat. He aimed to destabilize the Order and demonstrate his capacity to retaliate, thereby deterring the Crusaders from ever invading again. As he was ravaging the Order's territories, the Bishop of Dorpat quickly assembled an army to expulse the marauding Russians. After a small ambush where a Novgorodian scouting force was annihilated, the army quickly advanced. Alexander learned of this through some of the scouting force's survivors. He retreated, likely with the aim to lure the Crusaders into a hasty attack, capitalizing on their overextension and lack of popular support. He decided to turn eastward and head towards Novgorodian territory across Lake Peipus, one of the largest European lakes. That morning of April 5th, 1242, Lake Peipus, with its flat shoreline and shallow narrows, presented a strategic crossing point. The region's low-lying terrain, prone to flooding and dense reed beds, contrasted with Pirisar Island's fertility. Both sides crossed the frozen lake, though the ice was jagged and treacherous. Alexander's scouts likely informed him of the Crusaders' pursuit, prompting him to turn north to the Ravens Rock area for a tactical advantage. The Livonian Order, primarily composed of German knights, formed the core of the Crusader army. Alongside them were seasonal crusaders and foot soldiers, including Germans, Danes, and Scandinavian mercenaries, making it a diverse force. Tactics centered on coordinated attacks led by well-armored knights supported by missile fire, while the rest provided auxiliary support. Danish Estonia could raise 200 knights with native auxiliaries. Teutonic knights numbered 350 knights. The right was manned by a few sword brethren knights. In total, the Crusader army numbered around 650 heavily armored mounted German and Danish knights and 1,000 lightly armored Estonian auxiliary infantry. On the opposing side, the Russian army was even more diverse, comprising tribal aristocrats, peasant militiamen, and horse archers. Alexander positioned his diverse army along the shore of Lake Peipus. Archers were stationed in the center, poised to rain arrows upon the advancing Crusaders. Flanking them were horse archers, ready to harass the enemy's flanks with hit-and-run tactics. The infantry, composed of tribal aristocrats and peasant militiamen, formed a sturdy line of defense. Alexander's forces numbered over 6,000. They significantly outnumbered Crusaders. The clash commenced with a rapid assault by the Teutonic cavalry. The Crusaders, possibly aiming to capture Alexander, attacked in a wedge formation attempting to break the Russian center. Without their prince, the Russians would falter due to a loss of command. This fact was not lost on the Germans nor on Alexander. The Russian center staggered under the Crusader-mounted onslaught, yet the troops stood firm. Most of the action transpired on the beach, rather than the frozen lake, where Crusader armored cavalry breached the static Russian line. Then, Alexander's Turkish or Mongol auxiliary horse archers meticulously targeted the Danish flank of the Crusader force. The Danes found themselves confronted with an elusive foe, raining death from a distance beyond retaliation. A relentless hail of arrows descended upon the startled Danish forces. Estonians and Danes either fell where they stood or fled frantically, seeking any escape from certain demise. Despite an initial surge, the Crusader knights quickly wearied from their disorderly charge across the ice and the fierce combat along the shore. The Russian infantry, though bent, did not yield as the knights crashed into their ranks, carving pathways amidst the spearmen, but falling from their mounts on the treacherous terrain. As exhaustion gnawed at the Crusaders, the weight of Russian numbers began to tell. Meanwhile, the Russian left flank, led by Nevsky's Druzhina, the retinue of the Knyaz, halted the Crusader right and joined forces with the infantry to envelop the Crusader center. The Russian prince then unleashed his Druzhina, ordering them to encircle the embattled Crusaders. The Russian horsemen, eager for battle, circumvented the Crusaders and charged at them from the rear, revealing the perilous predicament facing the Germans and their allies. The struggle intensified, as the Crusaders fought not only to survive, but also to escape. Surrounded, they began to succumb to the victorious Russian blades. Yet, they did not yield to panic. As the intensity of the struggle became apparent, Estonian auxiliaries, realizing the overwhelming size of the Russian forces, hesitated to advance and eventually fled the battlefield, leaving their mounted troops behind. As the battle raged on, remnants of the Crusader center broke through the Russian envelopment, suffering heavy casualties, including the loss of elite knights of the Sword Brethren. Desperate to escape the perilous situation, the Crusader wings retreated across the lake, overtaking the Estonian auxiliaries which had already fled. The Livonian rhymed chronicle conceded the complete defeat of the Crusaders, overwhelmed by the Russian forces. Elements from both Russian wings pursued the broken Crusader units across the lake. Despite their efforts, the pursuit did not take them past the frozen reed beds and marshes along the western shore of the lake. Ultimately, the Crusaders, facing heavy losses and harassment from the chasing Russian force, retreated back to the Livonian shore, escaping the battlefield in disorder. The casualty figures from both German and Russian sources, while somewhat consistent, come with a degree of exaggeration and uncertainty. The Novgorod Chronicle's assertion of 400 German and Danish fatalities likely includes the 20 elite Teutonic knights mentioned in the Livonian rhymed chronicle. The fierceness of the personal combat is evident from the fact that only 6 knights were taken prisoner, a rarity during an era where high ransoms were common. However, due to the fog of war and subsequent events, exact casualty figures remain elusive. Alexander's return to Pskov and Novgorod, laden with spoils of war, including wealth, horses, armor, and prisoners bound to their own and other captured steeds, was celebrated. His fame reached distant lands. Peace negotiations returned conquered lands to Novgorod, but sparked native revolts in Crusader territories, lasting 7 years. Alexander remained focused on his territory and did not attempt to invade or conquer Livonia. Yet even as the Livonian Order reeled from their losses, whispers of an even greater threat loomed to the east, heralding the rise of a strong and ambitious Mongol leader who would soon test the fragile stability Alexander Nevsky had worked so hard to achieve. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please leave a like, it really helps out the channel. If there is a topic, battle, or person you would like to know more about, let me know your thoughts in a comment. I would also like to thank all my patrons and channel members for their generous support. If you enjoy House of History and you want to support my work, consider joining me on Patreon. For just $1 per month, you will already gain early access to all my videos without any in-video advertisements. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.